So how do I go about setting up this design, making this argument that social capital could be driving education spending? Right? So I use open source quantitative data, just data you can get from the internet. Anybody here can just pop open a laptop, access the data that I use for the study. And I perform statistical analysis. So I'm testing education spending, I'm testing social capital on education spending with the necessary controls dictated by the literature. And I'm also testing social capital on ballot propositions that are related to education spending, that would affect education spending in any kind of way. Also with the necessary controls dictated by the literature. And then I'm also going to introduce this idea of a qualitative comparison based on results from the statistical analysis. So the data. The unit of analysis, I'm looking at data at the county level for the entire state of California. So I'm looking at every county in California except for Alpine County, which I omit because it was a statistical outlier. It didn't really affect the results at all, and I'll actually show you a distribution of how it looks without Alpine. I use the Pennsylvania State University Center for Rural Development. They developed the social capital index measure based off of the study Robert Putnam does, and they produce this measure for every county in the U.S. And I'll explain the measure in the next slide. I use data from the California Department of Education. That's where I get the spending data for people, also the county level. California Office of the Secretary of State gives me voter information, propositions, voter turnout that I introduced also as kind of a robustness check to make sure that social capital is really what's driving the model and not just voter turnout, right? And then for my control variables, I'm pulling from the census. I'm getting median income. I'm getting adult high school graduates, percent of high school adult graduates in the area, and I'm getting the percent of the population made up by each racial groups, the percentage of whites, percentage of blacks, etc. So my dependent measures, like these are the measures that I'm trying to predict, that I'm arguing are caused by something else, right? Well, this should be first. This is the distribution to show that this, for the sake of transparency, to show this is the distribution of spending for each county in the U.S. You can see there's enough variation to where you should want to explain some differences, but there aren't any real statistical outliers that you can point to that would disrupt the model. Dependent measures. California Proposition 1B. It came into the ballot on 2009 during a special election. The goal was to secure $9.3 billion in supplemental spending for schools, so an extra $9.3 billion on top of what was already going into schools. But it ultimately failed to pass. It was voted down 62 to 38. 5 million voters participated. Only 28% of registered voters turned out. And then also trying to model this.
Quick question, is this, when you say education, is it K-12 or also post-secondary?
K-14, so I mean up to high school and then community college, first 2 years. Then I look at California Proposition 125. This appeared in the ballot during the midterm election in 2010. The goal here was to secure, end the 2/3 requirement to pass the state budget. So they moved to require only a simple majority to pass the budget, and they penalized legislatures for not passing the budget on time. So if the budget was passed late, then money would actually be taken away from the legislature's pockets and their salaries. This measure passed 55 to 45. 9.5 million voters voted, and 41% of registered voters actually cast ballots for this one. This one affects education in a not as a direct way as Proposition 1B, but the teachers' unions were one of the main contributors to the campaign. And also, given that education spending is mandated because of Prop 98 that I discussed earlier, to contribute to at least 40% of the budget towards education, it makes it extremely, extremely relevant. Nice one. My independent variable. So what I'm arguing is going to cause differences in how people vote on Prop 1B, how people vote on Prop 25, and any kind of differences in just pure per pupil spending. That's what tongue twister throughout the state. So the social capital index measure. What is it? It's a continuous variable that exists on a scale between -2 and +2. I'm gonna augment it. I'm gonna increase it, multiply it by 10, just for the sake of variation, and to make my results more interpretable when I introduce regression analysis. It's a principles component analysis that takes 4 different variables and kind of combines them together, right? So voter turnout, census response rate, number of nonprofits with a domestic focus, and population. So you have your more individualistic forms of participation in voter turnout and census response rate. These aren't things that you collectively, right? You vote in solitude, you respond to the census within your own home, but then you introduce the idea of the number of nonprofit organizations and associations in your area. This is something that takes place in a more collective way. So in a sense, you're kind of getting around some of the measurement problems by looking at social capital still kind of on the individual level, but you're also really focusing on what's going on in the aggregate. And you're also controlling for population as well at the same time. So this is a map of social capital kind of broken down into 3 different categories. The blue section is going to be areas that are counties that are high in social capital. The white is going to be middle, like sort of around average social capital areas. And then the red is going to be areas that are low in social capital. The yellow is going to be the omitted outlying county you'll see over there in the top. So how do I go about just the actual measurement? I'll show you the data, but how I go about the measurement. I'm using statistics. I give you descriptive statistics just to give you a glance of the data at large, and I'm going to give you some OLS linear regression estimates. And I'm going to do a qualitative comparison at the end as well. I'm going to compare 2 counties that differ only in social capital and education spending. So the descriptive statistics are pretty clear. Just to give you a sense that the standard deviations are relatively normal, so there's nothing going on here. No real crazy outliers. The average social capital index measure is going to be -10 on this +20 to -20 scale. Relatively low. California is not the best state in terms of social capital when you compare it to the others. Average county is going to have about 56% whites, 2% blacks, 26% Latinos, etc. You'll see that the average vote, the average amount of support for Prop 1B in a county was 38% of voters, and then you see over 52% of voters for Prop 25. Everything here looks pretty standard. So when we put in the regressions, what are the results, right? So here are 2 models in which I look at the social capital index measure, trying to predict differences in education spending. So basically, this is going to show you that how a 1 unit increase in each one of these variables is going to lead to differences in spending, right? So a 1 unit increase in social capital gives you $120 more, right? Or areas with higher social capital have $120 more in spending per pupil on average, right? Only the social capital variables were statistically significant in these models. So the other estimates are more or less not as meaningful because we're very uncertain about their true effects. But you can tell here that social capital seems to be having a pretty significant effect. Pay less attention to the actual size of the effect because, again, social capital is more of an aggregate concept. So to really hone in on the idea of social capital, of 1 unit of social capital making an effect is a bit misleading, and it would be kind of dubious. So, but you can see that it seems to be driving both of these models. So I broke it down, and we're looking at specific racial groups, right? So also these variables I forgot to mention are centered around the mean. So these are increases above the average. So a 1 unit increase above the average white population for a county gives you actually an $18 decrease on average. Again, statistically insignificant, so we're unsure about the results. What we can be a little bit more sure about is the role of social capital in the red, right? So you see, even when controlling for the white population in the county, social capital produces $130 more. Controlling for blacks, $125 more. Latino, $120 more. Asian, $126. And Native American, $113. But you see some statistical significance happening with the Native American group. Part of that is attributed to the role of the federal government sending in specific aid dollars to contribute to Native American education. So Proposition 1B, if social capital seems to be driving per pupil spending, we have to get into the mechanism of like how this is actually working. So how is social capital starting to have an influence, right, on education spending? So one way is through these, there seems to be through these ballot propositions. Although 1B fails, we can see that social capital seems to be like the largest predictor of whether or not people are going to support, whether or not people in counties are going to support that proposition, a proposal to increase spending by $9.3 billion in schools. When it came to Proposition 25 that actually passed, you still see a 1 unit increase is about like is about half a point, almost half a point increase in support for Proposition 25 to restructure the budget. So recap, what have we done? What have we talked about? Social capital drives raw spending per pupil. Social capital drives support for ballot propositions affecting education spending. But what do the numbers mean? So to really accentuate what's going on here with social capital, I look at Sonoma County versus Solano County. These two counties are extremely similar, right? They're both located in the Bay Area. Similar histories, a part of the first 8 counties that were established in the state of California, the original 8. Similar populations, roughly between 400,000 and 500,000 people. The median income is relatively similar to 64,000, 70,000. The percent of high school grads was exactly the same. It was 86% for both. And even in terms of partisanship, politically, these areas seem almost identical. They're extremely Democratic now, but they also lean heavily Republican during the Reagan era. The differences: Sonoma County gets over $1,000 more in education spending per pupil. And the social index capital scores are 10 points away from each other. So what else is going on here under the social index measure? Associations and organizations. Sonoma County has a lot more. You'll see that they have over 40 more religious organizations, almost twice as many civic organizations, almost 3 times as many business organizations, more political organizations, professional, and almost twice as many fitness and health organizations. So clearly, the role of associations are playing a larger role in Sonoma County and contributing to this item, to their social capital score and to their ability to generate social capital, right? But what does this look like? Just because they have more organizations doesn't necessarily mean that they're actually producing more social capital. These could be terrible organizations. They could just be organizations in name only. They don't do anything. They could just email lists, blast. They never meet, for all we know. So I did an investigation into the NAACP. Sonoma County actually has despite having a much smaller population, black population, Sonoma County is actually only about 1% black. Solano County is 15% black. Sonoma County's NAACP seems to be alive and well. They meet every month. They have officers. They have a website. They have a phone number. You can call them. You can reach them. Contact them. They're a vibrant organization. Solano County, none of that. I couldn't contact them. They didn't have a website. They didn't have a working phone number. There was very little information that I could get about Solano County other than information that's posted on the statewide NAACP website that just has the phone number that doesn't work and a few other tidbits of information about them that seem to lead me nowhere. When it comes to the ballot propositions, Solano County, we got nothing. But the question still becomes, just because Sonoma County's NAACP might have more social capital, they might be more active, how do we know that they're contributing to the kinds of things that we're seeing with the education spending? That's still the connection that we have. So I did some information. So I did some digging into how they supported these ballots. And you'll see that actually the California State NAACP endorsed Proposition 1B as a whole. So you could imagine that if the state department, if the state organization endorses the organization, endorses the proposition, then it would trickle down into what the state and what the local organizations are doing, given that they're active. So the state endorses Proposition 1B in 2009, and they also endorsed Proposition 25 in 2010. So it's still not conclusive. There's still a couple of pieces missing to the puzzle. But you can tell, but the evidence seems to be pointing to this idea that social capital is mattering here, right? That Sonoma County, the area with the more vibrant NAACP, is probably taking cues from the state NAACP, and they're helping get the word out about these propositions, and they're playing a role in creating these differences and fighting for more education spending for their communities, or and fighting for propositions that are going to do that. Like they're trying to change the laws that would affect more spending in their communities. So the major takeaway from this presentation is that social capital seems to be playing a significant role in explaining differences in education. The shortcomings are going to be, again, the data measurement issue. I try to get around it best as possible, and it's also cited as one of the criticisms of doing this kind of study. But so I would try to find data that was not existing at the county level. But the goal is to really expand and just look at more counties to increase the ability to compare, and look at states that don't have major cities that will sort of serve as these kind of outliers like that, right? And then I need definitive proof of the causal mechanism. I need to find that one sort of missing piece of the puzzle to show that the folks who are high in social capital, right, who are joining organizations and out and civically engaged and doing all this kind of work on the ground, that they're actually making this connection to education spending, and they're the ones who are dictating how this public good gets allocated. So that's kind of the future research and where I wanted to go. I want to look at there are 27 other states that have undergone equity-based finance reform. I want to replicate this analysis in those states to see if I get similar results. And then I want to do the analysis in other states that haven't undergone reform as well. I want to compare those states and see if the states that have undergone these reforms look different than the ones who haven't. And then also see if we can get more of these comparisons, more Solano versus Sonoma counties, to see what it's looking like when we actually dig into the organizational work, the kind of labor that they're doing, and how they're actually connecting themselves to the idea of education spending. References, yeah. And this is also just kind of a teaser. One of the missing pieces is categorical funds that I've been kind of exploring. The California legislature actually reformed it in 2009 and loosened the restrictions. And they're basically just these programs. It's like over 40 programs that the state legislature, the school districts actually apply for, and they can get approval by the state to receive these funds. The legislature loosened the restrictions so they can kind of do whatever they want with the money. And these programs range from special education to gifted programs to teacher training, teacher evaluation programs, but they're almost impossible to track. Like trying to figure out, like just even the data sheet that would look at who gets what money and where the money goes has been basically, chasing tail. So that's kind of a missing piece in the puzzle that I'm thinking about as well moving forward. If anybody has any questions or comments or ideas about that, let me know. Please feel free to interject. And that concludes the presentation.
And if we'd like, we can take a few minutes to do a question and answer, and then we're going to hear from Dr. Chin.
Vanessa. Okay, so one thing you talked about in the missing pieces was just kind of like the funds and where it was going. So that's great. Like that's because there's a very big difference in terms of the amount of school funding per student versus how it's actually allocated. Teacher salaries, class size. These are things that you might want to, if you can control for, that'd be great. The other thing that I kept thinking about it as you were going through your model, and admittedly I tend to be more familiar with tables than kind of like the
oh yeah, I figured like the grass would be easier.
Yeah, for given the audience, sure. But the question that I have is in terms of kind of that you use the mean income for an area, for a county, And I'm not sure that that necessarily allows for the kind of variability that might be included in kind of an income inequality overall.
It's the median.
Yeah, but also even like, I mean, you could come up with some sort of a you know, like a variable on a scale of 0 to 1 on the level of inequality in a given county,
Also like
right? Because that might might also indicate kind of like, you know, kind of issues of social capital. Because if Sonoma County has a lot of people and they're all making $70,000 and everybody's making $70,000, it's going to be very different in terms of the quality of social capital versus Solano County, which might have like a ton of people making $140,000 and then a bunch of people like well below the poverty line, and the county's just like F that. I mean, I mean, in terms of how income inequality can play within a given jurisdiction, and the consequent allocation of resources.
No, I completely agree.
But I can help you do that too.
Yeah, no, yeah.
Okay.
Let's follow up.
Okay.
Anybody else? Questions, concerns, ideas? What could be done better? Like, please.
Sorry.
What is clear? What?
Okay, so I think there are certain times where you might want to slow down in general. There were instances where you're abbreviating probably more than you should have, like saying something was political econ instead of saying, you know, kind of the, you know, a sub-discipline of political economy, just to kind of allow your audience a bit more background. Yeah, and you know, I have miscellaneous notes and I have horrible handwriting. And more generally, you might want to include a few more variables in your model. Like, I mean, I'm not sure if you did and then like pared them down.
No, just because I was building my model based off of literature.
Sure.
And that was just like the kind of advice I was getting from mentors. But it's probably because I hadn't explored the literature deeply enough.
Okay.
Right, so as I continue to explore the literature, I can find more different variables to include. But from the advice I've been given is just like going in adding variables without any kind of literature behind it is just like a death trap for yourself. So I'll charge that more to my reading than like my statistical or whatever process.
I wanted to know a little bit more about this index of measurement that you use for social capital, and I think I'm really interested in sort of what you think is really happening, like this mechanism that you're trying to pinpoint. So is it that social capital leads, or you know, whatever these things that make up social capital then leads to this, what you were talking about, reciprocity and eventually participation, which then is somehow, right, a predictor of spending on education. If that's the case, I think I think it's really interesting, right, where you were talking about the election, some of these elections were like 20% turnout. And so how do we understand, right, the way through which social capital is actually working? And then the other thing that I would, you know, maybe suggest you look into is the different types of groups that are involved. So the NAACP, you know, seems to be heavily involved and active in one area, but he also mentioned the unions. So this is an issue where the unions are heavily invested. Are there differences by these counties? Is the turnout different in different counties based on how many unions are able to get people to turn out? And so that'd be a really interesting sort of avenue that you can.
No, I'm glad you mentioned that, because actually I had like this whole theory about unions, but I just couldn't find the data to support it. So that's kind of the point that you mean, like the sort of riff that you mean. It's like I definitely think the teachers unions are playing a major role, right? And actually, like the teachers union have like a map where they sort of draw like regional lines. They have like I think 4 or 5 different regions, decentralized regions within the state, and it's like the cut points look almost identical to the map that I show you at the beginning, and it just raises some eyebrows. But there's not a lot of data on teachers unions. Like, there's no way to control. It's very difficult to control for the presence. I was playing around with different measures like the percentage of teachers in the percentage of teachers in the population for the county, and kind of coming up with these other kind of weird econ type measures, but nothing's really stuck out yet. It's something that I think is substantive, so I'll keep looking, but I'm glad you picked up on
Sometimes
that.
you can
You're
even
right.
call up this teachers association and see if they'll provide like various, like if they have numbers offhand. No,
I did.
Oh, you did?
I was like, can I get some data? And they were like, nah.
Which one did you call?
I just call
CTA or
CTA.
CFT?
I call CTA.
CTA is the huge one. CFT
Okay.
is much smaller, but because I'm involved with CFT, and we may be able to get you some kind of numbers, because we look at the stuff and we know, for example, that in terms of a voter, that CFT voter participation is like really high, and they do polling, after that. So there is data that's there.
Yeah, even the woman I talked to from CTA was like, off the record, that their participation rate was like
It's like 80%, and so whatever districts you're talking about, the teachers do get out there. So anyway, I'll talk to you, and maybe I can see if there's any other stuff I can.
That'd be great. I mean, because they're like some of the leading spenders behind these propositions, right? They're putting
Yeah.
tons of money into it, and it's clear that there's a role there. But the difficulty of being a social scientist is you have to figure out exactly how to get the evidence that this is going on. Right now, I just have some assumptions and I have some assumptions and I guess an intuition, but I don't have any hard evidence.
Wait, sorry, so can you tell us a little bit more, what was in that social capital index measure, like what items are part of that?
So it's going to be voter turnout, census response rate, the number of nonprofits in the area that are domestically focused, and then also it counts for population too. And I also have the measures broken up individually as individual vectors. So I've tried running the model too, the same model, just implementing different parts. And it's interesting that it seems like that the index itself, when you combine those vectors, that's when you get the statistical strength. Like just separating the two. I mean, looking at voter turnout, I control for voter turnout in the paper just as a robustness check to say, hey, it's not just voter turnout, it's something more than that. It's not census response rate, it's something more than that. It's not just the organizations themselves, it's more than that. It's this kind of whole collective story that's going on. And my idea is that it's the organizations that are utilizing the social capital, right? They're concentrating in areas, right? Everybody talks about how campaigns are so focused on like where people vote and where people participate. But organizations, unions, they're doing the same thing now. They know where the folks are who participate, and they're knocking on doors and they're giving them support propositions too. And my hunch is that they're playing a role in figuring out how to get folks to come out and support these kinds of things and getting them to get up and fight for more spending for people for their districts. But I don't know for sure. So, is that it?
As you reflect a little bit on your time with this research, what are some elements or items that were encouraging or discouraging or shocking?
That it was working. That I was getting results. A lot of folks, when I first started doing this project, told me that I was on a wild goose chase, that I wasn't going to find anything. That I was just, setting myself up to just waste time. But I stuck with it and I found some stuff, and that's probably the biggest surprise. But also the biggest disappointment is that I haven't completely figured it out. It's like I've been spending over a year on this project and I haven't figured it out, and that's probably my frustrating part.
Pretty strong.
Do we have any more questions?
I have a quick one. I missed the beginning, so I apologize if you talked about this in your intro. But given the challenges you've confronted and some of the advice you've gotten about where this project will actually lead, what kind of got you into this in the first place and really motivated you to stick with it? I mean, what is it about the project that kind of connects with who you are as a political scientist and where you kind of want to go with your career?
It's definitely personal. I just wanted to know, maybe from a political perspective, why some schools are good and why some schools are bad. And I feel like I was reading some stuff in education and talked about that from the more like pedagogical standpoint, administrative standpoint. but from a political standpoint, I don't think we know. So that was kind of the thing that motivated it. And I initially wanted to look at achievement, but I wasn't finding anything. But I thought spending was an important piece, and I thought the fact that spending and achievement were uncorrelated means that, like, okay, well, maybe we need to figure out ways to make spending more efficient, and also figure out, well, if maybe they're driven by completely different things, and maybe that's why they're completely uncorrelated. So yeah, it's just everything from, you know, not going to a great school, you know, and thinking about, like, you know, what you could do to or help improve the quality, that kind of thing. So.
You know, I was thinking about, I was looking at your data, I mean, your county by county data, you know, thinking of the county as a unit of analysis. I mean, if you thought about states, and kind of where California is now compared to where it was a few decades ago, you know, we're like down with Alabama now, spending. I mean, so you know something political is going on, right? I mean, you know, so, you know, so it really makes me think of that, and then you're looking more closely, I guess, in breaking the state apart and looking at the various pieces and how those things play out at the, I guess, well, I won't say the micro level, but the smaller level.
It's definitely something I can easily look into. Just the idea, great idea.
Not to give you too much to do, but more micro. I think with the local control funding formula completely overhauling how the state is approaching education from an equity-based framework, looking at almost at each, since so much decision-making is now left to the school site, or hopefully, looking at in each school with different varying amounts of social capital, how spending is targeted on certain student groups. So, you know, like schools in South LA, seeing the presence of nonprofits or coalitions advocating for resources being targeted to high-need students, seeing how the effect of social capital, what effect social capital has on where funds are targeted within schools. So.
Yeah, that's definitely a great point, because it's similar to what Professor Tyson was just suggesting a while ago, but you're bringing in the idea of the local control funding formula, which I'm scared of, because I'm pretty sure it's going to mess up my results.
Could be a blessing or a curse.
Yeah, because it's more based off of the SES background of the kids. So, like, they incentivize, and they basically reward districts who take on kids who are in poverty, right? They fund more kids who are poor, come from certain backgrounds and have certain needs, which is great, and which definitely needs to be done. But yeah, exploring how the allocation process is going to work within that is going to be a challenge. So I'm going to try to step up to it. And see what happens.
Jonathan, thank you so much for the
do this, and you just made it happen, so thank you.
One of the things we wanted to do, though, Jonathan talked about how SHI, the Summer Humanities Institute, was sort of the beginning of his journey here at UCLA. And we thought this would be a great opportunity to sort of follow up on your presentation and have a guest who could speak just very briefly about opportunities for diverse scholars who are interested in going to graduate programs here at UCLA. So we were very fortunate to have Dr. Christina Chin from AAP's program, let me say it correctly, from the director, she's the Associate Director of the Graduate Mentoring and Research Program at Peer Learning Center. So thank you very much for coming.
Thank you so much. I'd like to thank Dawn and allowing me the opportunity to talk a little bit about the work that we're doing over at AAP. Do you folks know where AAP is? Campbell Hall, just next door, part of the construction. The project is on its way. So as Dawn mentioned, I am the new Associate Director for the Graduate Mentoring and Research Programs, the GMRP office. And just a little bit about our unit. We're one of the units in AAP that's really focused on creating opportunities for AAP students who want to continue on with graduate school or professional school. So just some of the resources that we offer. We have a whole team of 19 graduate mentors. Are there any folks graduate students in there? Okay, great. Springtime, we're actually often looking for new graduate mentors. And so as a graduate mentor, we offer several different opportunities for undergraduate students to come in and meet with you on a one-on-one basis to talk about graduate school, thinking about applying to school, what they might need to do. We also offer several workshops throughout the quarter that you can refer your students to as well. And it's really about thinking about what does it mean to be an AAP student, and really thinking about historically underrepresented populations in higher education and preparing them for graduate school. So we have workshops on the nuts and bolts of applying to graduate school. A lot of times we have workshops about how to fund for graduate school. If I'm undocumented, can I apply to graduate school? So we have a wide variety of different programs that we're going to be, different workshops that we're going to be offering throughout the quarter. So we're going to be posting those, and hopefully you'll be getting out some emails about our workshops that you can refer to your students. We also offer several academic cohort programs. If there are students that you meet that are especially inclined in terms of conducting their own research or are thinking about applying to graduate school, I encourage you to refer them to our office. We offer several cohort programs where students apply, they get accepted to a cohort program, and they get hands-on experience with research as well as information about how they can apply to grad school. So by the time they finish their cohort program, they should have all their materials that they would need to basically apply, including a CV, statement of purpose, all the materials that they would need. So our mission is really to think about helping to diversify and transform the academy by creating a better pipeline for AAP students to get into graduate programs and really sort of demystifying what that process looks like. So does anybody have any questions at all? For the graduate students, please come check out our office. We are probably going to be hiring in the springtime.
I was just going to ask if someone wanted to become a mentor, how would they go about doing that?
Yeah, come by our offices, and we have a lot of programs that focus primarily in the social science and humanities, but we are hoping to have more programs and more mentors for folks in STEM as well. So yeah, we would love to have more graduate students as mentors, so please come and check us out.
And we have materials for the program up here and just general information on AAP as well. Thank you so much. Again, there is information up there about our ongoing programs. Dr. Hunt, may I put you on the spot for a moment and ask you to just give us a plug? We're in the middle of a crowdfunding campaign.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so here at the Bunch Center we have something called the Hollywood Advancement Project, which is designed to essentially create the most comprehensive ongoing study to date on diversity or the lack thereof in the Hollywood industry. And the reason why that's important, I mean, you know, aside from the kind of the employment dimension, I mean, you know, women and people of color are woefully underrepresented in front of the camera and behind the camera. That's a problem, but more importantly, as a sociologist, which I'm interested in, you know, the images that are produced by the Hollywood industry that's largely white male dominated, you know, has a real impact. There's a huge literature on kind of what images do and how they affect the way we think in terms of, you know, politically and self-esteem, psychologically, otherwise. So the Hollywood industry plays a major role in that in terms of movies and television. So anyway, so we have this Hollywood Advancement Project. Part of that is the Hollywood Diversity Report. We just released the first one back in February. It was covered throughout the trade press. It's beginning to have a real impact. Everyone's talking about it in the industry. We went directly to industry players and stakeholders like the major studios and networks to support the project, but not solely, because we want everyone to kind of buy in so that when, you know, they support the project on some level, the report comes out, they actually read it, actually use it in their business practices, which ABC Disney, one of our supporters, is starting to do. I don't know if you guys have seen any of their new shows, but you know, it remains to be seen how the shows are going to do. But that said, they're venturing out on the wild side in ways they haven't done in ages in terms of the programming, you know, in terms of diverse programming on ABC Disney, and a few of our other sponsors like HBO and Time Warner are doing similar things. But these are relatively small sponsors, so we've launched this crowdfunding campaign reaching out to the general public, you know, to the audiences who would watch these things, and to, you know, thousands of would-be actors and entertainers and others who can't find work because they're women minorities, and they've been supporting us through this crowdfunding campaign. So we're encouraging you guys to follow us as well. And more importantly, to use your social media networks to kind of publicize our crowdfunding campaign, to get the word out, because even more important than the money we're raising, it's a small portion of our overall budget, is the visibility. And we need people to make people aware of this issue, to make people aware of the problem, because it's often easy to kind of forget because you have, what, 67 cable channels and Netflix, Hulu, this and the other. But when you look at it all together like we're doing in our study, you realize just how amazingly you know, far behind we are in terms of diversity relative to what the nation as a whole is doing. All right. So anyway, Our website, www.oncenter.ucla.edu, has all kinds of feature articles about UCLA Spark and our campaign. I can't remember the exact URL
That's either, but
for
if
it.
you go to our
If you go to our website,
website,
it's
you can
there.
click on, and you
Yeah.
can tweet, you can
Yeah.
Facebook us. We're trying to raise $10,000 in
We have
31
23 days left.
And yes, we have 23 days left.
How many people use Twitter? Twitter users?
Tweet.
Okay. Hashtag change the narrative. All right, just hashtag change the narrative. You look it up, you'll see a whole bunch of stuff for us. And we've had a number of prominent people in the industry retweeting and following us. So we encourage you guys to do the same. Let your friends know, your social network buddies know, and we want this thing to go viral, hopefully by the end, and we'll really, have the type of impact that we need to have on this issue, which people have been talking about for 30 years, but nothing's changed. All right.
Thank you so much for coming.